He didn't know her name. He didn't know her bank balance. All he knew was that she looked hungry, and that was enough. Marcus Ellison had swept the same 6 blocks of sidewalk for 11 years. Every morning, before the sun fully climbed over the brick buildings of his neighborhood, he pushed his janitor's cart past the corner grocery, nodding at the same faces, picking up the same litter, living the same quiet, unremarkable life. He was 52 years old, and if you asked anyone on that street who he was, they would tell you the same thing: the janitor from the community center down the block. The man who always smiled, even when nobody smiled back. The man who never seemed to have much, but somehow always seemed to have enough to give. That particular Tuesday morning was cold in a way that cuts through jackets. The kind of cold that makes people walk faster and look down at their feet instead of at each other. Marcus was walking home after his overnight shift, his uniform still smelling of bleach and floor wax. His pockets nearly empty after paying rent 2 days early because his landlord needed it for an emergency. He had $11 to his name until his next paycheck, and he had already decided he would stretch it as far as it could go. That was when he saw her. An elderly woman stood outside the corner grocery, her coat too thin for the weather, her hands trembling slightly as she stared through the window at the shelves of bread. She did not go in. She simply stood there, the way people stand when they are calculating whether they can afford something, and already knowing the answer is no. Her eyes had the specific tiredness of someone who had been fighting something alone for a long time. Though what that something was, Marcus could not have guessed. She looked, to him, like someone's grandmother, someone's mother, someone who deserved better than standing outside a grocery store in the cold, unable to buy bread. Marcus did not think about it. He did not weigh his $11 against his own hunger, or calculate what he would have left over. He simply walked into the store, picked up a fresh loaf, paid for it, and walked back outside to where the woman was still standing, her breath visible in the cold air. He held it out to her, his voice gentle, and told her that nobody should have to go without something as simple as bread. And that he hoped it would help, even if just a little. She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes filling with something he mistook for embarrassment. She thanked him quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, and Marcus simply nodded, tipped his cap, and continued on his way home, already thinking about how he would make his remaining $10 last until Friday. He never asked her name. He never asked why a woman standing outside a grocery store looked like she was carrying the weight of the entire world on her shoulders. He gave what he could, because that was who Marcus Ellison was, and he walked away without expecting anything in return. If this story has moved you already, this is the moment to like this video. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances. And subscribe to Kindness Corner, because stories like this deserve to be seen by people who still believe good things can happen to good people. What Marcus did not know, what he could not have possibly known, was that the woman's name was Eleanor Voss, and that 6 months earlier, Eleanor Voss had been the CEO of one of the largest logistics companies on the East Coast. She had built her empire from nothing, clawing her way up from a warehouse floor to a corner office, through 40 years of relentless work. But an empire built alone can crumble alone too, and Eleanor's had crumbled quietly, without headlines, the way most private tragedies do. A hostile takeover engineered by someone she had once trusted. Like a son had stripped her of her company in a matter of months. Her home had been sold to cover legal fees. Her closest friends, it turned out, had only ever been friends with her position, not with her. And so Eleanor Voss, once a woman who commanded boardrooms with a single sentence, found herself alone in a small rented room above a laundromat, learning for the first time in her adult life what it felt like to count coins before deciding whether to eat. She had not told anyone who she used to be. Pride, she told herself. But it was not pride, not really. It was grief. Grief for the woman she used to be. And shame that she had let herself become someone who needed help from a stranger holding a loaf of bread on a sidewalk. That night, Eleanor could not stop thinking about Marcus. Not because of the bread itself, though it had nourished her more than he could have known, but because of the way he had given it. He had not looked at her with pity. He had not made her feel small. He had simply seen a person who needed something, and given it, expecting absolutely nothing in return. In a world that had recently shown her its coldest, most transactional face, Marcus Ellison's small act of decency cracked something open in her that she thought had gone numb permanently. Over the following weeks, Eleanor began quietly asking around the neighborhood, and it did not take long to learn who Marcus was. She learned about his long hours at the community center, about how he often used his own small paycheck to fix things the building's budget could not cover, about how he had once spent an entire month's savings helping a teenager on his block afford a winter coat and school supplies. Nobody had ever asked Marcus to be extraordinary. He simply was quietly, every single day, without anyone watching. Eleanor Voss still had resources most people did not know about. Resources tied up in old investments untouched by the collapse of her company. And so, 3 months after that cold morning outside the corner grocery, she returned, not as a woman in a thin coat, but as herself, dressed simply but unmistakably composed, carrying a folder instead of a trembling hunger. She found Marcus at the community center, mop in hand, and this time, she was the one who spoke first. She told him who she truly was. She told him what his bread had meant to her that day, not as charity, but as proof that decency still existed in a world that had tried to convince her otherwise. And then she told him she wanted to fund a full renovation of the community center in his name, along with a trust that would allow him for the first time in his life to stop worrying about stretching $11 until Friday. Marcus stood there in stunned silence, the mop still in his hand, unable to fully process that the frightened, hungry woman from that cold morning had been the same person now offering to change his life. He had not given her bread because he wanted something back. He had given it because it was simply the right thing to do. And perhaps that was exactly why it mattered so much. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness always finds its way back, in one form or another. Before we go, we would love for you to comment one word that describes what kindness means to you. Because your voice is what keeps stories like this alive. In the end, Marcus Ellison never set out to change anyone's life. He simply saw someone who needed help and gave what little he had. And sometimes, that is exactly how the most extraordinary stories begin, with the smallest, quietest acts of kindness.